Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Most Merciful. Stories sell. Human beings are extremely drawn to stories. If you look at the New York Times bestsellers, more than half of the list is going to consist of stories, whether those stories are fiction or non-fiction. People love to read novels. Why? Because novels, stories, whether fiction or non-fiction, allow us to connect to others through their problems, through their experiences, and feel that we are not the only ones going through this specific problem. I remember one of the most fascinating books that I've read is a book entitled Wild. It speaks of the story of a young girl who grew up in an extremely poor household, and her parents constantly had fights and they never got along. Her parents separated, they divorced. Her mother was extremely unlucky with men, and that made this young Cheryl go through a lot of agony and pain, emotional pain, to see that her mom was not very lucky when it came to men. Men came in and out of her life. Until Cheryl is informed by her mom that she found him a decent man and they get married. And they put their money together to buy a home. This home is far away from the city. And she says, we were so poor that I never ate ice cream until I went to college. Everything in our home was purchased from the Dollar Tree store or the 99-cent store. She says she was the first person, despite all the challenges, to go to college. Within her family, Cheryl was the first person to step foot on college campus. She says, when I went to college, my mother was in her early 40s, and we were informed that my mom has stage 4 cancer. And that was the hardest, most difficult day of my life, to know that my mother has stage 4 cancer. But the more difficult day was the day that I had to stand on my mother's grave. I had no one. I felt lonely. I felt alone. I have lost my best friend. I have lost my mom. So I could not continue college. I dropped out. My stepfather, who was meant to give me security, asked me to leave the home. So this young Cheryl becomes homeless. And I want you to just think for a moment, how can someone take so much pain? She ends up going towards drugs because sometimes we think that by using drugs or alcohol, the problem is going to go away. That's why Islam says drugs and alcohol are forbidden, because the problem is only going to get bigger. The problem is not going to go away. We have to stand. We have to stand tall. And we have to face the problem, confront the problem, so that we can come out with success. Some of you may have come across the story of this woman who decided that she's going to change her life, she's going to own her life, and she did something amazing. She walked or hiked the Pacific Coast Trail for 6 months. 2,800 miles out of a backpack. And she talks about how difficult that journey was and how many times she sat there and said, I'm going to give up. This is too difficult. When she was attacked by animals, or she lost her shoes, or she, for example, lost her water bottle and things got very difficult for her, she kept going. When you read that story, you find inspiration within that story. And there are many, many books that I can think of right now that have inspired not only me when I read them, but they have inspired leaders around the world. And that's why book clubs of leaders around the world, if you look at them, within the list of the books that they recommend for me and you to read, are books that are meant to inspire us through stories. People, human beings, are drawn to stories. We love to hear stories. God in this ayah says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ.
نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين.
Who's telling us the story here? Is it the best author and being published by the best publisher? No. It is God the Almighty. He says, I am telling you the story. The difference between a human telling a story and God telling a story is that the human version of the story is more focused on entertainment, is more focused on how it draws me so that I can continue to flip the pages while I'm only being entertained. However, God says entertainment is not important. The lessons are important. That's why in the stories of prophets in the Quran, a lot of details are omitted. And the details that are there are meant to be lessons for us. We're meant to be taking lessons from them. So God says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ. We're the ones giving you the story. أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. The best of stories. Some scholars say that this refers to all the stories in the Holy Quran. The story of Noah, the story of Abraham, the story of the Prophet Muhammad, the story of, for example, Adam and Eve, the story of David, the story of Solomon, and the list goes on. The story of Jesus, the story of Moses, including the story of Joseph. God says, we give you the best of stories. And we are the best of storytellers, meaning God the Almighty. He not only gives us the best story, He's also the best storyteller. And also, it could refer to the fact that He's the most authentic storyteller. Because God the Almighty has all the knowledge of the story and the full scope of the details of the story of all the prophets mentioned in the Quran. It's not that there was somebody there, a historian writing, what he saw. So God says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. Some scholars believe that yes, the Quran is full of beautiful stories. However, this story, God says, is the most beautiful one out of them. And if you look at the story, it's the story that is really inspiring. And I'll tell you why. Of course, as we continue, we will add. It's a story of a man who is extremely handsome. The most handsome man that lived at his time. The most good-looking man. Now, what makes this story interesting? He was seduced by a woman who was the most beautiful woman in Egypt. That's what we know about her. And what obviously made her more attractive was the fact that she was also the most powerful woman in Egypt. And there was nothing stopping young Joseph from engaging with his lust, with his desire, with this woman. Yet this man, this young man, went through this test and he did not break. Now, do we relate to this? I believe every human relates to this. Every man and every woman in the world will relate to this. Every man and woman in the world will be tested through their desire and their lust. And it's not only the fact that religion tells me I should not engage or I should not give in to my lust and my desire. So if I don't have religion in my life, or I don't believe, or I don't subscribe to a specific religion, then I can, and it's no problem. Today, every health book out there, has nothing to do with religion, tells you that a human being without self-control will always be somebody who is weak. If you don't know how to say no, at circumstances when you have to say no, you will always fail. Successful individuals are individuals who hold on to their unlimited desires. You think people love to wake up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym and work out? Who doesn't enjoy the comfort of their beds? Who doesn't enjoy the comfort of laying on a couch and watching Netflix all day? But that's not how success is made. That's not how legends are made. Exercising self-restraint and self-control is the very first pillar and the backbone of being somebody who's going to be of influence and success. So the story of Yusuf, regardless what religion you subscribe to, is going to be inspiring. Also, at a later stage, Yusuf is tested with unlimited authority and wealth. He becomes the deputy to Pharaoh. And this Pharaoh says, you have unlimited access to wealth. You are the prime minister or the president of Egypt. And I give you unlimited authority over the wealth. And what does Yusuf do? Yusuf is honest. Yusuf is not corrupt. And this is easier said than done, that somebody has access to all the wealth, yet he still exercises self-restraint and self-control. Today, I may find $5 on the floor. I'm going through some shopping center and I see $5 on the floor. It's not very seductive. But let's say we end up finding $5 million. Or through means which we believe nobody's going to ever know about, we can obtain $5,000 from corrupt money, $5 million from corrupt money. What do? Allah says this Joseph, was able to pass those tests while he was able to slip. So this story is very inspiring. Allah says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. The best of stories, most inspirational stories, بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. The story is part of a revelation. The story, what is revelation? Revelation is God speaking to humanity. God is not going to just tell us things we don't need. God is not going to waste our time. God is not going to give us extra information. God is not going to give us insufficient information. Just think about yourself and your surroundings and the world today. Imagine if those two things were resolved. You know the damage that the pornography industry does on humans every single day. Some reports indicate that some people are so addicted that they waste hours. In some countries, I read that, people spend more than 4 to 5 hours with this specific addiction. That studies that have nothing to do with God and religion tell you it destroys their mind, it destroys their soul, it destroys their self-esteem. Millions of women are subject to becoming modern-day human slaves because they expose their bodies to gain wealth and fame, and then they're hit with regret. Why did I do this? Why did I not offer my mind? Why did I not offer my soul and my intellect and my wisdom and my knowledge to people? Why did they have to enjoy my body? And today, maybe I'm no longer as beautiful or as seductive, and I feel the rejection. And that's when they're hit with suicidal thoughts, and a lot of them end up taking their lives. If this problem was solved, or the problem of greed, look at the wars today. Human beings are so selfish that they manufacture drugs and they sell it to other human beings just so that they can become rich. When this person is manufacturing the drugs and selling the drugs, and this drug ends up with a little kid, 7 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and it destroys that kid, and that kid is never going to be able to grow to be a young, powerful, successful, happy individual that's going to be a good father, that's going to be a good citizen. And we human beings see that. And it does not faze us because we are becoming richer. We sell weapons to one another, and those weapons kill innocent children. All we care about is we're making more money. We're becoming wealthier. God says that this human greed and lust and desire was controlled and managed by Yusuf in the best of ways. It's a story that gives you a moment of awakening. بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ. So it is part of revelation. Exactly what human needs, the communication between God and His creation. بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ وَإِن كُنْتَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ لَمِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ. However, before we read this verse, God says, you're ignorant. You don't know all the lessons that you can take from this. The amount of awareness that it can bring to you. And that is why, I'll say this and conclude for today. Imam Ali says, Quran is your best friend. ما جالسه أحد إلا وقام عنه بزيادة ونقصان. If you spend quality time with the Quran, not time in close proximity, meaning, if somebody dies, I open this book and I read some verses and I gift it to them. If we spend quality time with the Quran, meaning we stop, we ponder on its verses, we try to connect it to our lives, then the Quran is going to be our best friend, and it's going to give us an increase and a decrease. An increase in enlightenment, an increase in knowledge, an increase in awareness, and a decrease in confusion and darkness and uncertainty. When we read the Quran, and the Quran becomes our guide, I promise you, our uncertainty will be gone. In fact, if you know the Quran, and if you've read the Quran, and you have a relationship with the Quran, but you're going through a problem today, either there's some sort of disloyalty that you feel from your friends or your family, either some sort of abandonment, you have problems at work, you have problems at your family, in your family, you don't know how to choose your career, you're stuck somewhere. All you need to do is revisit the Quran. This time when you revisit the Quran, you realize, oh wow, last time I read the Quran spoke to me differently. This time when I read the Quran is speaking to me differently. It's as if the Quran knows that I am stuck with this specific situation, and it keeps on offering me solutions. So if you're stuck having to decide which school to go to, or who to marry, or what job or career to choose, you read the Quran and it gives you specific solutions. It speaks to you with that tone. Then at a later stage, you have issues with your children, and you feel that that your children have abandoned you or what have you. You read the Quran and you realize the Quran is giving you different solutions now, and it's as if the Quran knows your problem. This is the miracle of the last divine message sent by the Almighty God to humanity. In the next verse, inshallah, God willing, we will begin discussing the story of the Prophet Joseph and his conversation with his father Jacob. Until then, Assalamu alaikum.